twist and move, dance all night like young lovers do. Your heart is changing. Now we don't dance like we used to. Silent disco on the floor, baby. Mr. DJ, he'll get me through. When the beat's gone, you can't save me, baby. Smoke and mirrors, pretty lights. Another runaway city boy getting too high. But boys like you tell pretty lies. The 5 a.m. low in your eyes says your heart is changing. Now we don't dance like we used to. Silent disco on the floor, baby. Mr. DJ, you'll get me through. When the beat's gone.
This is Broad Radio. For you, by you. Broad Radio. Here for more.
Hello and welcome to Broad Radio. I'm Jo Stanley and I'm thrilled to have as my co-host today the amazing Zoe Daniel. Hi there, Zoe.
Hey, Joe.
I know that you're absolutely loving the Olympics and you are really, you've been on the couch getting as many Olympics hours in. What's been your highlight?
Oh, I'm obsessed. I'm sorry. I just can't stop watching it. And there are obviously have work to do. So some days I've had to banish myself from the lounge room and not turn on the TV because every time I hear the commentary team getting excited, I have to run in and see what's happening. But I just love it all. I mean, I honestly do. I love the swimming. I was so just completely thrilled and inspired by those women, particularly. Our women's swimmers were just extraordinary. The Matildas in the soccer on the weekend, I mean, unfortunately they dropped a game last night, but they still played really well. But their game against Great Britain on the weekend, I'm surprised the whole of Australia couldn't hear us screaming from our lounge room. And I just think, look, it's been a pretty tough couple of years. Let's face it. There's no sort of putting that aside. And I know a lot of people were like, oh, the Olympics, it shouldn't be happening because of COVID risks and all those sorts of things. But I guess I kind of took the position that if you're an athlete who's been working for your whole life and you may compete in only one Olympics, I think about 70% of the athletes only get to go once. You might actually just totally miss your window if that Olympics doesn't happen. So I was so pleased to see it did get up. And although I thought the atmosphere might be a bit flat because of lack of crowd, I've just found it completely inspirational. And I feel like it's exactly what I needed during this time of COVID. Extraordinarily dedicated, hardworking, inspirational people doing amazing things.
Yes.
What could be better?
I know. And then the emotion and the joy and everything that comes with it. Oh, I absolutely have been loving it too. I've surprised myself because I was ready to poo-poo it. But geez, I'm well and truly on board. So coming up very soon, we're going to be crossing actually to Tokyo, which is super exciting. We're going to be speaking with Channel 7 reporter Sharnelle Vella, who's one of our favourites on Twitter. We've become quite obsessed with her. So we're going to be joining her in Tokyo very soon, which is super exciting. Also, later in the show, we are going to be speaking with former MP Cathy McGowan AO. We're going to be talking about independence in Parliament and how important independents are. We're hoping that it might change Australia at some point if we get more independence in Parliament. And also we're going to be speaking with Pioneer for Women's Health, Janet Michelmore, CEO of Gene House for Women's Health. And we have a very special announcement around that coming up very soon. That's all after this. Broad Radio is proudly supported by Chemist Warehouse. Chemist Warehouse, great savings every day. So I have to start the show with our exciting announcement, Zoe, and that is that we are partnering with Jean Hales for Women's Health. Jean Hales for Women's Health are an amazing organisation who work tirelessly for advocating for women's health and educating and supporting women. And we're partnering with them. We're doing a little pop-up show during Women's Health Week in September, 6th to the 10th of September. We're going to be doing daily shows at 1 p.m, covering all the different issues and topics that they bring to Women's Health Week. It's just a super exciting partnership and something that we've been working really hard to establish. So it's a big, big day for Broad Radio to be announcing that, Zoe.
Yeah, and just a really inspiring organisation. Jean Hales, you know, women who start something like that and leave that kind of not only legacy, but something that continues through the generations and continues to benefit women and people over time, I think just really need to be recognised as super special. Like, you might not sort of think when you think of Jean Hales, you know, the organisation, this was one person that inspired this thing that is now benefiting so many people. Fantastic to be involved with them.
Yeah, we're really thrilled. Yeah, you're right. She's changed. Jean Hales and, in fact, Janet Michelmore, who the family have gone on to really keep Jean Hales for Women's Health alive. Yeah, they have changed Australia and women's health in general. So we're thrilled to be a part of this organisation in a very tiny way. So we're going to be speaking with Janet very soon. A couple of other bits of housekeeping at the top. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're watching on Facebook, like and follow, and do share your thoughts and your comments throughout the show today. We always love that when you do that. If you would like to catch up on any other episode, you can do that on Broad Radio On The Go, our podcast, which is available wherever you get your podcasts. And we love it when you let us know what you think with our More to Say survey. If you enter our survey, our one question poll, I should say, this week, you could win a Love Your Hands pack with thanks to Saba Organics. Thank you so much. It's a beautiful little pack of 100% certified organic products there. And this week, our question is, gee, it's contentious. We haven't actually said this yet. We're asking the question, Zoe, do you call yourself a feminist? Oh, who knew that such a word, feminist, is such a controversial thing? Because for me, Zoe, and I'm sure you're the same, it's so obvious. Of course we're a feminist, because that's what equality means. But a lot of people really distance themselves from that word.
Yeah, and it's like feminist with a capital F or a small f. And how does feminism manifest for you? You know, in my mind, feminism is sort of entrenched in our daily life, the way that we interact with each other, the way that we interact with our family members, people in our workplace, the way that we present ourselves to the world, our expectations of it. And all of that has come from feminists before us. You know, you can't take that for granted. So I understand that some people don't like the label of I am a feminist, but we all sort of need to embrace, in my mind, the fact that we wouldn't be sitting here where we are today if it wasn't for all of those women who put in all that hard work ahead of us. And we have to continue to honour that and pursue improvement as we are, Jo. I mean, that's what we're trying to do, right?
Absolutely. And yeah, I think you're right. It's impossible to ignore the fact that we have a vote today. Women are allowed to vote. It's so basic, you know, and there are so many other things that we benefit from because of the feminists that have gone before us. But also, I really don't like the way the word has been sort of made to represent angry, aggressive, you know, bra burning. I mean, don't wear a bra, I don't care, but it's, you know, it really has been kind of sold as a negative thing, and we need to wrestle it back as a really positive, powerful thing.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what I think is interesting and positive is that I know that if I asked my 12-year-old daughter, are you a feminist? She'll say, well, of course. Like, yeah. And understands that her expectations of the way that her life will be are because of everyone that's come before her, and so that sits as sort of central to her identity. And I don't think girls of that age see it as negative at all. I think they see it as very positive.
That is great parenting on your behalf, Zoe. And yes, I think that next generation are going to save the world. Now, I need to bring something up for you. With you, I should say. Well, there's been a little bit of argy-bargy on the Twitter sphere between Kirsty Wiebeck and a whole bunch of horse-loving types, because our very own Kirsty, one of our broads here, she's one of the funniest women on Twitter. You've got to check her out if you don't follow her on Twitter. She, at some point, said something negative about the dressage at the Olympics, and people really took offence. And it was a bit tricky for you because, as a fellow broad, you're a real fan of the horsey sports.
Oh, yeah. Well, I do enjoy that banter with Kirsty on Twitter. And to be fair, I mean, she set herself up during the lockdown as a deliberate agitator on Twitter. Her modus operandi is to get a reaction. In this case, perhaps it was slightly larger than what she expected, because she was kind of like, oh, dressage should be out of the Olympics and I'll probably get cancelled for this. And my response was, yeah, you're done. And then there was a complete avalanche of dressage and horse lovers who pounced on her. It's all in fun. It's all in good fun. But, I mean, Joe, I started riding horses when I grew up doing dressage, but especially show jumping and eventing, and it was really my first love in life, and I miss it a lot. And I once aspired to go to the Olympics as a 3-day eventer myself, so I will always defend the equestrian sports. And I will make the point right now that although we had an all-male eventing team, we won a silver medal in eventing yesterday and an individual bronze for Andrew Hoy, who I've met several times. I covered the Athens Olympics when Andrew was riding. 8th Olympics, won a bronze medal at 62, and
Incredible.
Still potentially aspires to go on to another Olympics. So, that's an absolutely extraordinary. And, eventing is a hard sport. Yeah, and all the equestrian sports are hard sports, and Australians do really well in those sports, and we have to be proud of that.
Yeah, Andrew Hoy is extraordinary. He's our oldest ever Olympic gold medalist. Is that true?
Yeah, I think he's won 3 golds in previous Olympics.
Incredible.
And he's just also a very nice man too.
That's nice to know.
Yeah.
I full disclosure, I was picked on by the Pony Club girls when I was in primary school, because we lived near a pony club, and every Saturday my mum would give me a gold coin. Oh, well, no, it would have been a $2 note back then. And I got to go up and buy a pie from the milk bar, and the Pony Club girls would gather out the front in their very beautiful boots and jumpers and velvet jackets. And they were very nasty to me in my op shop tracky dags. So I have a little bit of trauma when it comes to the horsey sports myself. But I think the fancy Pony Club girls give the horsey people a bad name, because you're not all like that.
No, and I always kind of aspired to be a fancy Pony Club girl when I was a kid. I was not from a wealthy family, so I was always the one with the ratty horse and the ratty saddles and the secondhand boots and all those sorts of things. But it is a sport. A lot of girls get into ponies and riding, and the one thing I would say about it is it really does breed independence and toughness and problem-solving skills and all sorts of things, because when you are responsible for looking after an animal and training that animal and feeding it and making sure it's okay and working outdoors and having to sort of sort things out for yourselves, there's a lot of strength that comes from that. And I actually take a lot of who I am as a person from my time running around on pony as a kid in an era, to be fair, where there was very little parental supervision. So if you fell off the pony out in the back paddock, you got back on and rode home.
All right, well, you couldn't get all of that in your tweets to Kirsty, but I will pass it on. Someone else who has been a true delight to be following on Twitter of recent weeks. She's doing an extraordinary job covering the games over in Tokyo, but also a great job giving us all the information we need with regard to COVID as well, with a lovely, healthy dose of humour in there. It's just refreshing, and we're so excited to cross now all the way to Tokyo. Sharnelle Vella from Channel 7. Hello, Sharnelle.
Hello, good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's a true delight. Tell us, how is it over there in Tokyo? Give us a sense of the vibe, given there's no crowds.
Yeah, it's a strange feeling, I'll have to say. And when we were asked to come here, full disclosure, I was worried. We were hearing the stories about the state of emergency and we didn't know what it was going to be like. Took the plunge, got here. I have to say, they have done an incredible job at making this feel safe and be safe. We are testing all the time, constantly. You're running to the bathroom at events to do a test quickly and then drop it off at the testing centre. We've got apps that kind of track our movements to make sure that we stay in the bubble. But the atmosphere itself, we were also a little bit worried about. You mentioned it before, those empty stadiums. We've noticed that athletes are bringing a lot more of their support staff to their events, so there is still yelling going on. And the other thing that I think is important to touch on is we didn't know how these games would be received back home. There's obviously a lot of people flying out of the country for these games, which people aren't able to do. And the reception has been amazing. Everyone I speak to back home has found some kind of a lift out of the games, and that's really wonderful for us here, being able to bring it to homes and put some light into people's lockdown lives. Of course, we know several places locked down back home, and the athletes are really feeding off that too. They're so aware and so humble about the fact that they're here and people are in lockdown, and they want to make sure they do their best for Australia, and you just feel so wonderful being here. It's an extraordinary event to be here, and you have to remember as well, we're witnessing it and Japanese locals can't even witness it, so it does feel extra special.
And what's been the highlight for you so far, Sharnelle? I mean, the Australians have done exceptionally well so far, and we're only on Tuesday of the second week, so there's still time. Does something stand out?
Yeah, I think I've said the whole time, if you wanted to learn the Australian anthem, the pool is where you would head. It has been played so many times there, but especially for other sports, and I think we always know we're going to do well in the pool. There were a couple of times we didn't, but generally we know we're going to do well. But there's so many great Aussies. You touched on it before. Andrew Hoy with Kevin and Shane are just incredible in the equestrian. I was there last night. They were amazing, and everyone had been telling me about Andrew Hoy in the lead up and saying he's such a great man. He's such a great man. You don't realise it until you meet him, how wonderful he is and such a champion of his sport. The Matildas as well, weren't they incredible in that? Really, I was falling off my chair at that event. There were so many things happening, and they were such... They knew that Australia was watching, and even when I interviewed them afterwards and said, I think everyone in Australia's heart was in their mouths. We fell off our chairs throughout that game. An equaliser in the 89th minute. They came back really strong. Of course, unfortunately, they didn't make it through in their last game, but an incredible just display of how much sport means to us. And I think we'd all forgotten that in those lockdowns. We'd seen AFL and we got that back up, but missing out on the games by that year, we'd forgotten how much we love it, and I think it's made us feel a little bit Australian again.
I would agree. And so the Opals last night, that was a beautiful win to see.
Wasn't it? And they had a really tough game the match before. They really wanted that win. It was so exciting. I think we had Ryan Daniels out there for Channel 7, and he was trying to do the post-match interview, and he couldn't get a word in. They were all screaming and jumping around, and he did really well to get the interview done. But they were so exciting, and women in this Olympics have been incredible. I'm not taking anything away from the men, so don't jump on me for that, whoever's watching, but the women have been amazing. And, we talk about championing women and being a feminist and all those things. Well, even boxer Harry Garside, he did a really interesting post I saw yesterday where he posted all the negative comments that had been made about our female athletes, saying, don't worry about winning gold, get back in the kitchen. And he posted a whole collage of all of those negative comments that have been made about our athletes. And he wrote a really honest spiel down the bottom which said, I used to be someone who made these comments, and none of you could do half the things that our extraordinary female athletes are doing and have done. So it's really nice to see men being cheerleaders for women in these games as well, and supporting all the gold medals and achievements that have been that have come out of the Tokyo 2020 games, because we live in the past here, 2020.
Well, I mean, if you look at Jess Fox comes to mind, you know, oh my God, I'm in awe of her, particularly as a very bad canoeist, just to put that on the table. I just watch her tackling those rapids and I'm like, you are made of steel, lady. I mean, the pressure, but also the physical effort involved in that. I absolutely was just so excited when she won gold in her canoe slalom event. But also, the other person who came to mind from yesterday was Riley Day, the Australian sprinter, who, you know, she said, I think after her race, having done really well, that she's working at Woolies and trying to make a living to fund her training. And you kind of, like, I think in Australia we can have a bit of a perception that, you know, elite athletes, and obviously taxpayers are funding a lot of their training, and that, you know, there is some support, but not every athlete is getting that. And there are so many hard yards. You know, there can be decades of effort that they go through from when they're tiny kids, you know, getting up in the morning, 4:30, going to the pool, whatever it is, to get to where they go. And then it's still struggle street often, even just to get to the Olympics. I mean, there's just so many of those stories.
Oh, there absolutely is. If you look at our women's softball team, we've got an accountant on there. We've got an AFP officer on there. Harry Garside, the boxer I just mentioned, is a plumber back home in Victoria. They all have, most of them have full-time jobs away from these sports. And for example, the Japanese softball team, you come out of college, you get a job with a major company, say a big, you know, Panasonic sponsors you throughout your career, your softball career, and then you go straight, and after your career, you go and work for that company. And it's just not like that for so many of our Aussie athletes who have to find a way to train and to make their dream happen. I met one of the shooters, the Aussie shooters, and he said to me that, you know, he had to strike a deal with his work that he would work 4 hours a day and still train. He had 75 people working under him. And when he comes back into hotel quarantine, he will manage that group of 75 people after leaving the Olympics. It's really tough for our Aussies, but they make it happen. And you'll never hear them say the word sacrifice is something I've noticed. They haven't sacrificed, in their eyes, anything to be here. They just want to be here because that's the drive that they have. It's absolutely incredible and inspiring, because I struggle to do my full-time job sometimes, and they're doing it all.
Oh, it's extraordinary. Their desire to be the best blows my mind, because I don't have a competitive spirit, so I'm not made to be an athlete, but they really want to be the best and would not give up ever. That's why we love it, isn't it? That's why the sport's just, everything you watch, I don't know, it just gets you right in the heart, because you can see how much heart they bring to it. What about Emma Mckeon, who has become one of our greatest ever Olympic athletes, and I think now holds the record for the amount of medals a woman has won at the Olympic Games, or equal with someone in Helsinki. I can't find my notes here. You can tell me, Sharnelle. Have you spoken with Emma since this extraordinary performance in the pool?
Yeah, we have. And isn't she extraordinary? And the thing that you'll notice about Emma, and the thing that you'll notice about all of those athletes, especially the swimmers as well, is they're so humble. When they win, they really want to win. And Emma's a really great example of just how humble, and, you know, they want to share it with the rest of the team. She is just incredible. And I think we've all been in awe of our swimmers as a whole. They're all amazing, you know, sharing the podiums with each other when they do win, celebrating every win together, no matter if they're gold and bronze in the same race. They're just truly inspiring, and we've seen those you can see in the swim team as well, the bond they all have, and you can tell how hard they've wanted it. The other thing I just want to touch on as well, if I can, with some of our athletes, is the mental toll of these games. That extra year, I think, was really difficult for some of them. They didn't know if they would come. If for some it gave them an extra year to train, and that was great. For others, it really put the pressure on. And the mental side as well of going through lockdowns at home and having to train the way they did, not being part of teams, having to train alone in their states was really difficult, especially in sports like swimming, where it can be a solo sport. Boxing can be a solo sport. Running, athletics, those are... My phone keeps ringing. I'm deleting that call.
Well, we are keeping
Sharnelle,
you perhaps
I'm actually wondering. Sorry, Joe. I was wondering, since the phone's ringing, I was wondering if it was Brett Sutton, because you know, if you haven't been following Sharnelle on Twitter, get on it, because she's the purveyor of the day's facts in regard to the various lockdowns, to the point that the Victorian Chief Health Officer, Brett Sutton, declared her his top choice, the chosen one, shall we say, chosen one. So you probably picked good timing to go to the Olympics, Sharnelle, because at least Melbourne's out of lockdown, and it's, you know, everyone is not like sitting watching their Twitter feed every morning waiting for the numbers. So you picked your break well, but I'm sure everyone's looking forward to you getting back so that you can start rolling out. I know you've been rolling out still, but you can be back in Australia rolling out your daily facts.
Yeah, and look, the daily facts was something that came along because I realised that in the media we were getting so much more information that was actually making it to the news, and there was really good information there that I thought could help people understand the situation better. And full disclosure, I think the media, including myself, made mistakes during the pandemic. It was a really difficult time for everyone, and probably introducing people, especially in Victoria, to those live press conferences every day was something that the public just hadn't seen before. They didn't know how to react, and we didn't prepare the public for it either. So, you know, I think just giving people the facts is what I came up with. I'll give you the facts. You decide how to feel about them. Let's throw in some humour, and if you're going to be on Twitter reading a huge thread, let's learn something at the end. So I always throw in a bonus fact that has nothing to do with COVID. So we're all learning at the same time.
Yeah, I really love that you sort of mentioned that, I've got to say, Sharnelle, because I've had a love-hate relationship with the media since the pandemic began, because I have to keep giving myself a break from what I'm reading, because I think at times it has been really irresponsible. It's been difficult to digest and know what is factual and what is deeply biased at times. As a member of the media, I kind of find it refreshing to hear you say that you recognise that, and actually it must be frustrating for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I absolutely recognise that, and I think that this was the one news event, global event, that impacted every single person, whether it be you wanted to know if you could look after if your kids were going back to school, if your business was going to be okay, if you had COVID yourself. It impacted everyone, and we in the media just weren't ready for that. We weren't ready for the global pandemic like the rest of the world, and we made absolute mistakes, myself included in that, and it took us a little while to work out how to do it. And I realised in this pandemic, and it should be the case always, but it's not, that there was never a more important time to be straight down the line. There was no room for inserting emotion or fear into this pandemic, and that's what I've learned through it, is that it is our job solely to tell you what's happening, and it's up to you to decide how you feel about those facts and numbers. And if I tell you the number is 203 today and you go, okay, I can deal with that, I could tell you the number's 203, you might go away and feel really frightened by that, but it's not my job to tell you how to feel. It's your job to decide how you feel about the news.
Wow. I love that. It's just been awesome to have you on the show, Sharnelle. We hope that you guys continue to stay safe in Tokyo. Your Twitter feed continues to give us all the information we need with some awesome facts at the end, as you say. So thank you so much. And you yourself you've become quite connected with Kirsty Wiebeck on Twitter as well.
She's been
hard to avoid.
Me, I must say. I can't cancel her. I will not cancel her no matter what she says, because I just love it.
Oh, what a joy. Thank you so much, Sharnelle Vella, over there over there in Tokyo, I should say. Give our regards to all of the Aussies over there.
I will. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks, Sharnelle. And
Thanks,
we'll have
Sharnelle.
more Broad Radio after this.
Take it now, keep up.
Well, Zoe, when former MP Julia Banks released her book earlier this month, I think it was, God, what is time? I think it was this month, her book Power Play. Zoe, you alerted me to one of the points that she made, which is the importance of independent MPs in our government and the power that they have. And so that led us to think, well, how can we actually encourage women perhaps to go down that path of running for Parliament and being an independent? So we're very pleased to welcome to the show someone who's an expert in this, because she is a former independent MP herself. Cathy McGowan, good morning.
Good morning.
It is so lovely to speak with you. Can you tell us, you were an independent for Indy for 6 years. What was that experience like for you?
Wow. Good morning, and good morning, everybody, and a special hello to Zali. So we call it Indi, actually.
I'm sorry.
Local. No, that's fine. It was wonderful. And it was I'm now 67. I became a member at 60, and it was that of my career. I loved it. It was big. It was work. It was really challenging. It really made me a much better person. And it's the sort of job that I think is not for everybody, but for those women in particular who are looking for that challenge and that opportunity to be of real service to their community. I can't recommend it enough. So I'm very happy to talk today about why I think that.
Cathy, you and I know each other. We've known each other for a long time. We did a trip to the US together with a group of women back in the late 90s. And, you know, it was very evident then what a dynamo you were and are. So I can't say that I was surprised when you decided to enter federal politics. But I'm curious why you did it. Like, what tripped you from being an advocate for rural women, which is what you were, among other things, to deciding to step into the political sphere?
So a range of things, and it wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was a journey for me, as many big decisions are. In the first instance, there was a group of young people, this electorate of Indi, who were very unhappy with the state of their presentation. And they said to some of our oldies, like, you need to step up. You got leadership, you talk about us doing things, but you need to step up. So there was that call first off. And then as we moved into getting organised, I was happy to be a team player and be part of, could we make the seat independent? I got more and more people came up and said, well, Cathy, if it's going to be, it's going to be you. You know, you've got the skills, you've got the interest. But the debate in my mind was I already had a life, I had a business, I was doing really exciting work in agriculture, Zoe, in India, in Papua New Guinea, and I loved the excitement. I was running my own business and it was really doing good work. So I didn't want to give that up. But what really made the difference in the end is that saying, if not now, or when, and if not you, who? So we looked around for other people. We went and had meetings with lots of famous names, with footy players and mayors, and said, would you stand? And no, not interested. And well, if it was going to be me, and we had a strong team around me, so I felt reasonably confident. And then so many other people stood up to leadership roles. So what we had in the end was, while I was the candidate, I wasn't alone. I belonged to a really supportive group of people. I think in the end, and we have Monday night meetings, and 20 people would turn up, of huge diversity of skills and whatever. And so the team actually got me elected, and I was the spokesperson for the team, if you want. And that stayed the whole time I was a member of Parliament. And then when Haynes decided that she'd up in 2019, the team was there for her as well. So I think that's what made it. I belonged. It was a really safe decision, though challenging and exciting.
Why are independents so important to our Parliament?
So if you just give me a minute, I'll explain how Parliament works and where independents fit in. So in the House of Representatives, there's 151 electorates. So the magic number is 75, plus one for the Speaker. Team, and they're both teams. The teams that gets the 75, it's winner takes all. And if you don't get your 75, then you're in opposition. Now, the thing about independents is we're not part of those teams. We're not Liberal, we're not Labor, we're not Green. We actually represent our communities. So that's what independent means. And you sit in a very special place in Parliament. You sit on what's called the crossbench. So you don't actually sit with the team, sit up horseshoe in a little space. And that what makes it special about being an independent is because you're not in the teams, you're still a player, you still vote, but you're very, very special. And you're special all the time because you can speak your own mind, you can represent your community, you can do what you think needs to be done, and you vote how you need to do. And why that's so special is because all the others, the team players, can't do that. So the team players have to the same way, to do what they're told. And there's only a limited number of positions of leadership in the teams, and they're really competitive. And I think lots of the news we've been hearing lately about how bad the parties are, and misrepresented in particular, is because of the intense competition in those parties for the very, very small positions of leadership, key players, being the manager of government business. So there's only a very small number of leadership positions, and the competition to get them is intense. And for the women, it was particularly intense. I tell you what, the Blacks didn't want the women being the leaders. They had those positions for themselves. Whereas on the crossbench, as an independent, the competition is quite different. The skills you need are really different. You need to be a really good negotiator. You need to be able to be strategic, and you need to be able to build alliances. So that's what's different about an independent. You're not part of the team, but for someone like me, I'd always run my own business and I'd worked internationally and was independent by nature, as you were saying, Zoe. So that worked superbly to my strengths. And I know with Helen Haynes and Zali and...
Sorry to interrupt, Cathy. I mean, it's it. I mean, you kind of lead me to my next question, actually, and it's a bit twofold. One is, yes, now we see, so Helen Haynes, who followed you into the seat of Indi, you've got Zali Steggall, who beat Tony Abbott for Warringah in Sydney. You've got talk of perhaps a flock of independents who might run in various seats in the next election. So has what you did created a kind of a model and a system for how to get not only independent women, but independents in?
Well, there's two things about, if I could answer in two ways. When I first got elected, I was the only woman on the crossbench. It was me and Clive Palmer and the blokes. And by the time I left, there were 4 of us on the crossbench. So I think what happened, and it was circumstances as well as the times, the women actually looked at me and Rebecca Sharkey and those other women, saw themselves reflected in those piece, whereas we hadn't had that before. The last independent woman had been Pauline Hanson, and she was an independent, but by default, because she didn't get pre-selection for the Liberal Party dropped her. So I think people looked at the crossbench in that picture and they saw women like themselves and thought, oh. So that first thing happened, and there was a sistership there. We were competitive, but it's a bit like being on the netball team. We really did sit and work together. And then that has happened is the idea that I come from northeast Victoria, which is a rural electorate, and it's what's called a safe seat. And the thought that a group of country people, and we were quite skilled, effective country people, but that we could run a campaign that overturned a safe seat, I think that's what got people's imagination. And so people in other safe seats said, oh, well, maybe I could do that. And I think the fact that we were women it could have been anybody, but there were public women, Helen and I and Zali and the others, are quite competent professional women, and we could hold our own. And the community said, oh, well, we like you, we'll vote for you. And you've given us a really good choice. So I think that model is, you being what you can see is really, people are going, well, I don't like what we've got. I don't like the 2 teams very much at the moment. Something else that better reflects it. And maybe this independence is a way of doing it. But the short answer to the questions, Ali, is there are lots and lots and lots of people out and about now thinking, well, how can we do that? How can we run a campaign? How do we find a candidate? how do we get the community behind us, and then how do we make a safe seat a competitive seat. So there's a lot of work happening in that.
Well, Cathy, and I do want to acknowledge that you are in country, in a regional area, actually still in Indi, I believe.
Yes, I live in, yeah.
Yeah, hence the internet connection isn't very good. So I feel like we've got to sort of get as much information as we can out of you before it all goes bust on us. And you mentioned the questions people are asking: how can I get a team around me? How can I actually mobilise my own skills and the people that I know to maybe get elected? And I want to get that information from you. But I also wanted to reference this photo that we've been showing, that's you getting a round of applause, I believe, as you said farewell to Parliament. And there's another image that we have of you with Anthony Albanese, and you're surrounded by your fellow independents there. And it indicates to me that it's a very different experience for independents being in Parliament, that, you know, you look like you're kind of having a good time rather than what we're hearing about the kind of treatment that a lot of the women in our parties receive.
So absolutely, I loved the job, and I was to leave it after I was very happy to leave it after 6 years because it was so intense, and knowing that Helen Haynes was going to, can I just turn the video off and see if it makes a difference?
Yeah, you could try that.
And you can get, does that?
We'll hear your voice.
So it was a lovely job, and did 6 intense years and achieved what I wanted to, and then was very happy to move on to something else. And I know the others feel the same. It's wonderful. And that photo there is my community came up in busloads to Canberra, and they gave me a standing ovation. So there were hundreds of my community in the gallery clapping and cheering and saying thank you. So yeah, that doesn't happen in the parties. So that was amazing. And the other thing about the job that is you actually get things done. So the wonderful thing about being an independent is you actually can be true to yourself and get things done. And the answer to your question, if you want to find out more, we've set up a web page called the Community Independence Project. And the project is about supporting people who want to run as independents. So to go onto the web and find it, it's thecommunityindependenceproject.com.au. And I'll just finish about this photo here. The thing that I loved about it is there's so much capacity for my strengths to come forward. So here we are, the whole crossbench, and I was the team leader in this one, negotiating with Anthony Albanese. And then just prior to that, we'd had a similar photo of Scott Morrison, who was then the Prime Minister, coming up and talking to all of us about how we were going to vote. And it was just so much fun because we would caucus beforehand, we'd talk through the strategies, we'd decide who was going to be the spokesperson on this, and then how are we going to follow it up afterwards with all our different networks and ways of doing things. And so while we were never the main players, we were often the bit in the middle that created the difference. And I know that Helen Haynes is doing that now with integrity, Zali is doing it with climate, and they're actually moving the levers of Parliament in a really significant way. And if we had more independence, and dare I say women independence, I know it would make a huge difference to that Parliament.
Well, I would love to see more independence in Parliament, and if you are watching and thinking, maybe there is a calling there for me, head to the Community Independence Project and start on the journey. I imagine it's a very difficult one, but it sounds like an incredibly rewarding one. Zoe, have you ever considered running for Parliament?
I'd be lying if I said it hadn't crossed my mind, Jo. And Cathy is an inspiration to me, 100%. We've known each other for a long time, and I think what she's done is extraordinary, especially for a rural community like Indi. Super impressive. And then to foster Helen Haynes into the same seat. I think that in and of itself says a lot about Cathy, that it's not about Cathy, it's about other people and community and what that brings long term. But, like a lot of women of my ilk who probably do have something to offer, as you would too, there is a hesitancy around just what that experience would be like and the negatives of that. It's a big commitment. A big challenge, a big commitment, and as we've seen over the last 12 months, not always the most positive environment to work in. But I take a lot from what Cathy said, if not now, when, if not me, who? I think that's a question we all have to confront ourselves with if we want to bring change to the world, positive change.
And can I introduce you to my book?
Yes.
It's called Cathy Goes Canberra, and it tells the story, a bit about how we got there, what we did, and why, from this country perspective, it's possible. And I hope it takes away some of the fear that people have that the job's too big. And if you get a team together, it's just like running any business. Totally possible, and a really good place to be.
I love this. It's totally possible. Oh, I would like to empower you today. If you're thinking of doing it, do it. It's totally possible. And yeah, seek out this book from Cathy McGowan and seek out that website as well, because there is assistance out there as well. Cathy, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a little bit of a shaky time with your internet, but we got there. So it was really wonderful to have you on Broad Radio.
Thank you. Good morning, Jo, and lovely seeing you, Sally. Really a pleasure.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Cathy.
We'll have more Broad Radio after this. Well, at Broad Radio, we are growing because of the incredible partners that have come on board right from the beginning. And so we say thank you to Saba Organics, one of the world's only 100% certified organic products. Saba Organics create beautiful organic range of skin and body care, and I'm sure that you would agree with me that whether it's hand wash or hand sanitizer or cleaning products for our home, it doesn't really matter what it is, we don't want toxins or chemicals on our skin or in our home. And what I've really learned is that we can't always know exactly what the ingredients are, because if something is described as natural ingredients, sometimes that means that those ingredients have still been exposed to toxic herbicides and pesticides in farming, which of course damages the earth, and it's not great for our body either. However, Saba Organics is 100% certified organic, which means no aluminium, no sulfate or parabens, and no toxic chemicals. I love the Saba Organics lemon tea tree and kunzia hand wash, but you can check out their whole range at sabaorganics.com.
Whenever we're apart, we miss each other so much. So, please accept this daily dog as a sign of my love for you.
Broad Radio, talking inspo we love, info we need, and sharing more of us. Watch and listen live every Tuesday 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time at broadradio.com.au, or find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and LinkedIn at Broad Radio Oz. Talk to us live. Call on 1300 8 Broad. Catch up on demand anytime, anywhere, every time, everywhere. On the train, we'll be here. 2 a.m. existential crisis? We've got you covered. Broad Radio. Here for more.
Well, women's health is an absolutely critical topic of conversation here at Broad Radio. We're really passionate about advocating for and supporting women in their women's health, which is why we are so excited to announce a partnership with Jean Hales for Women's Health. It's an amazing organisation that has worked tirelessly to advocate for women's health over the last 30 years. And the most exciting thing is that we are going to be doing a pop-up show for Women's Health Week this year, 6th to the 10th of September. You'll be able to see us every day sharing stories and information around women's health. And to talk more about the amazing work that Jean Hales for Women's Health does, we are so thrilled to welcome to the show CEO Janet Michelmore. Good morning, Janet.
Good morning. How are you?
We are both really well. Oh, I'm speaking on behalf of you, Zoe. Are you well? So
very well, thank you. Thank you for checking, Jo.
I don't want to assume. Janet, for people who don't know, could you just share what sorts of things Jean Hales for Women's Health does? What the amazing work that you do?
Jo, that's a great question, because we do a variety of things focusing on the needs of women. So when we set up in 1992, we had a very clear vision that was to provide clinical services for women, to provide education programs and also undertake clinical research that was relevant to women, particularly at that stage at midlife and beyond.
Janet, how have things changed over that period? Have your areas of emphasis shifted in terms of women's health?
They've expanded, not so much shifted. So it's really in response to what women are asking us for. So when we set up, the organisation was set up in memory of my mum, Jean Hales, and she was very focused on the needs of women at midlife and beyond. Her absolute mantra was make women from, say, mid-45 onwards a priority and ensure that they're in good health. So that means that when we opened, we were really looking at the needs of what was called the menopausal woman. So what did she need in terms of symptom relief, preventive health strategies as she grew older? Then what we know...
Sorry, I interrupted you. Go on.
No, go, Jo, because I think I know what you're going to ask. Go for it.
Well, I just wonder if at that time, 30 years ago, to be speaking so openly about what you call the menopausal woman was groundbreaking then.
Well, I think actually what Mum did in the late 60s, early 70s was absolutely groundbreaking. One of the things that was said about my mum was that she was affronted by how her colleagues and the community regarded women as they got older. And Mum was no shrinking violet. She used her medical knowledge to make it better for women at this time in their lives. So she was absolutely a pioneer. So in 1972, she opened the first clinic in Australia devoted, and that was at the old Prince Henry's Hospital on St Kilda Road, a clinic that was absolutely devoted to women at midlife. For me, what was even more staggering was that it was staffed by what we would now call a multidisciplinary team. So there were female GPs who specialised in women's health. There were endocrinologists or hormone specialists, gynecologists. To say you were absolutely focused on women, and the menopausal transition was totally groundbreaking. She opened a second clinic at the Royal Women's Hospital in Parkville in 1974 with the same model. But what she also did was travel the country and talk to GPs and women about best practice management of menopause symptoms and how women could look after their bones and their health as they got older. That to me was absolutely groundbreaking. So when she died in 1988, way too young, she was only 61, her colleagues, and the family can take no credit for this, her colleagues, who were all absolutely devoted, midlife woman has got to continue. And that was the beginning of Jean Hales for Women's Health.
And so would you say that that's been a success, Janet? I mean, Jean Hales for Women's Health is its own success story, but that shift in mentality, would you describe that as a success story?
Zoe, that's a slightly confronting question, because I look now at how some people regard the menopausal years and the menopause transition, and there is still stigma around it. And we've noticed recently a lot of media talking about women in the workplace who are going through these symptoms, how to best manage them, etc. And I think we've still got a long way to go to focus on actually women and men as they get older. But let's just focus on women at the moment. There are lots of things women can do to make themselves be in better shape, be it exercise, diet, etc. But there are some women who are seriously challenged by menopause symptoms. And then if we go to other areas that we look at now, polycystic ovary syndrome is one we look at and focus on, and also endometriosis, for exactly the same reason. We identify gaps in knowledge and care in women's health, and then ensure that both health professionals and the community have the latest evidence-based information so that those people can be well managed and well looked after as they manage those symptoms of those particular conditions.
Because those conditions are so debilitating and they receive very little funding, very little research, and there's still so little known about it.
Menopause, I think, has attracted some funding, and recently there has been a lot of funding for endometriosis. And I think that's a result, that endometriosis funding is a result of women and support groups who've done a fantastic job lobbying funding bodies, be it government, charitable bodies that donate money, to ensure that the awareness is better about symptoms of endometriosis and management of it. But sadly, even yesterday, I heard stories of women turning up to emergency departments with absolutely shocking pain and either being told that they were dependent on drugs or that it was all in their head. We've still got a long way to go, that it's not in women's heads. They are not seeking illicit drugs. They are in serious pain. That pain needs to be acknowledged, it needs to be believed, and it needs to be well managed. Similarly, even now, when we look at the menopausal woman who may complain of a variety of symptoms which do actually affect her quality of life and do affect her ability to cope with families, communities, and in the workplace, we actually need to address those and say, these are the best things for you to do to manage those symptoms. These are the risks and benefits of these management strategies, but ensure it's the latest evidence to provide to both women and health professionals who are looking after those women.
Are we getting better as women at firstly stepping forward and speaking up about these issues, but also self-care along the way?
Two great points. I look at how my daughter, who's in her mid-30s, how very open she is about her health, her ability to talk about her health, and her friends. I'm 67, and I still think that women of my age group are reluctant to complain, to say anything isn't going well. I think there's a cohort in the middle between my daughter and me who are actually doing much, much better than my age group at talking about things that affect them. And the stigma is reducing for particularly sensitive women's health issues. But it all depends on women's confidence. It depends on their knowledge. And if Jean Hales does nothing as an organisation except raise women's confidence to talk to their health professional, talk to their friends, that would be a big win for me. But it is all about being able to have the confidence to go and talk to doctors, to say, this is what I'm worried about. Can you tell me what are my options here? And Zoe, you had a second question, and now I've forgotten what it is.
Well, I think you answered both of them, because one was really about speaking up and the second one is about looking after yourself. And those two things are quite interlinked in many ways.
They are, but you're right about looking after yourself. Particularly during the pandemic, there's been some good and bad things. We've all had to actually self-care in terms of when we've had to isolate, when we've had to go for COVID tests. So we've actually become, as a community, and I think women are particularly good at this, we've done very well. But in terms of where women put themselves on the priority list, and I'll use myself as a bad example, I work in the industry, I know what I should be doing, but during the last 18 months, we know that women have not taken up the opportunity or have been able to do their normal screening. And I could fib to you and say, oh, I've been perfect at this, but let me tell you, I haven't been. But the dog has been to the vet, but I actually haven't been to my cardiologist to have a checkup. So we actually put a lot of people first. And I've probably nagged the kids and made sure they've done their checkups. Historically, we know the literature tells us that women are not good at putting themselves first in terms of self-care. And that is something I hope younger women will be better at, and that is looking after themselves. It is not selfish to indulge in self-care. It's actually just a great thing to do. But women are not fabulous at it.
It's very hard because we feel the pressure of meeting our work expectations, caring for the family. If we have kids, that kind of juggle is a whole other level. And then, you know, the dog needs to be walked and you've got to do the laundry and the house needs vacuuming. And in the end, you fall into bed at the end of the day exhausted, having done nothing for yourself. It's very hard to say, no, right now I'm giving myself 45 minutes to go for a run.
Oh, Jo, you've just nailed it on the head. And no, I'm going for a run, or actually I'm going to sit in a bath with a cup of tea. That seems for women a slightly selfish thing to do. And if we had one message, women taking time for themselves, and I know this is such a cliche, but the old safety demonstration on the aircraft, put on your mask before you look after other people. We've all heard it a million times, but it does apply to our own health. If we're in bad shape, we cannot look after people we live with, we cannot work effectively, and it's a really bad strategy. But it's going to take a little bit more time for women to actually appreciate that that's the way to go.
So this is, I suppose, one of the reasons why I think it was 10 years ago, 2013, Jean House for Women's Health established Women's Health Week, which has now become a national event on the calendar. What was your motivation in establishing Women's Health Week?
Getting the conversation started, Jo, and I think that's what we all want to do. We want people to ask questions, talk to their health professionals. So it was all about let's talk. And it's been remarkably successful. I've watched the development of Women's Health Week over that period, and I'm staggered and thrilled at the engagement. So this year, even when things are challenging, we're heading towards 2,000 events right around the country. We jokingly say from the Tiwi Islands to Tasmania, but it's absolutely true. We have from the smallest communities in the northern parts of Australia to the most southern tip of Australia. And that's very exciting, seeing women get together, talk to each other, and we provide daily content for these women that they can look at. It's providing opportunities, different learning opportunities for women. I come from an education background, and the thing I'm absolutely passionate about is making sure that we provide lots of ways for people to learn and lots of opportunities for women to talk to each other. There's nothing better than connectedness, as we all know. And the one thing, I don't know about you two, but I'm really missing catching up with friends, keeping in touch, just face to face. You know, Zoom's. That's what Women's Health Week does. It connects communities, it connects women, and equally it provides opportunities to learn more about their health in the 5 days of content.
Yes, and I'll just give you the 5 days of content are really cool this year. You've got them themed. So each day represents a different theme around women's health, and they are mental health, movement versus marathon, periods, sex at any age, and sleep. All 5 of those things are so critical for women's health, and we're looking forward to bringing our pop-up show 6th to the 10th of September, where we're going to be having in-depth conversations about those 5 things. I have been just overjoyed to have you on the show this morning, Janet. I love the history that you and your family represent for women's health in Australia, to hear about your beautiful mum, Jean. And Zoe, this is my favourite takeaway from this morning, affronted about the way women were treated as they got older. How good is affronted? I'm always affronted. Zoe,
Such a beautiful photo of Jean Hales too. She looks like a tough woman.
Yeah,
she was the kindest, most generous soul, and so damn funny. She was hysterical.
It must be such a delight to do something so important in her name.
Oh, I love every day that I work at Jean Hales. Absolutely love it. But I also have great admiration for, frankly, the guts my mum had to stand up and say, this is not good enough, people. We need to treat women better than this. And that was in the late 60s.
Oh, that's our mantra today. We need to treat women better than this, Zoe. Yes.
What a champion.
Yeah.
But thank you both very, very much. And thank you for this fabulous partnership, which I know together we're going to do wonderful things for women.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Janet Michelmore. It's been lovely to have you and to share all of that information around Jean Hales Women's Health. Zoe, I'm going to go about my day affronted as often as I can because it comes on me sometimes.
Yes, I'm going for an affronted run today, Joe, after that.
There's lots in the world to be affronted by. It's what spurs us on. So thank you so much for joining me again on Broad Radio. It's been a joy as always.
Loving it. Always a pleasure. Thanks, Joe.
And we'll be back with Broad Radio next Tuesday. We'll see you then.